Still on my way through the IMDB bottom 100. Up next, I've managed to find another one in a row, and another video game adaptation. 2008's Far Cry, streaming for free on... okay, this time it was on Popcorn Flicks. Yes, apparently they made a Far Cry movie. It doesn't really seem to be remembered in the same way that other bad video game movies are. I'm guessing it wasn't well marketed or released too widely outside of its home country of Germany. A video game movie made in Germany. If I didn't know any better, I'd say this was... oh dear. Yep, this was directed by the master himself, the king of bad video game movies. The guy who's probably going after me after this video, because obviously he will. Everyone's gonna see this video. After all, I'm obviously the most famous movie critic in the history of the universe. Go ahead, challenge me to a boxing match. My scrawny ass will knock you out in one punch. So yeah, this doesn't even appear to come up in a lot of the conversations about the Boll. If you think about him, you probably think of House of the Dead, Alone in the Dark, Blood Rain. Some of you might even be thinking of Postal. You might think about his unrelenting douchiness, his immaturity, his refusal to accept criticism, his disdain for the audience. But unless you're a fan of the Far Cry games, you probably have a ways to go before you hit this one. You might even think of his non-video game movies first. Which I guess makes a little sense since this film is by far the most forgettable thing I've seen on this list so far. It's also one of the worst, but not in any way that's really interesting to talk about. This is the first Boll film I've ever seen, but in comparison to what I've heard about his other movies, it's especially not interesting.
You created it all so you could be immortal. Why? To live forever.
I'm actually kind of worried about whether or not I really have anything to say about this, but let's start with the Wikipedia page. There isn't a lot to say on that. All I could really find in production is that Boll bought the rights to this first-person shooter game before the first one was even released. I guess it's really sheer luck that the game was a hit, although I think it would be kind of funny if this was a bomb and he just wasted money for a forgotten game that nobody liked. I do not remember this coming out. I don't know if this got a wide release in my home country of America, but I'm guessing it probably didn't. I mean, it's Uwe Boll after he earned his reputation as one of the worst directors out there, and it had no stars that were marketable in the US. If you ran an American distribution company, would you put in the money and effort to put this in wide release? But like his other films, Boll was still able to get funding for it through a loophole in German tax law. For a while, if somebody invested in a movie in Germany, they would get 50% back from the government. While this loophole was closed in 2006, by that time Boll still had enough money from a tax shelter to keep making these movies, and so it didn't matter much to him when this one bombed hard. This movie also has no Rotten Tomatoes score, no Metacritic score, no nothing. The critics knew there was no demand for reviews on this. Uwe Boll's YouTube channel has at least one of the trailers posted, but with so much black screen before and after that the whole video is probably twice as long as the trailer. Okay, confession here. I have not played any of the Far Cry games, nor do I know anything significant about them. I said the same about Mortal Kombat in my last IMDB video. I'm an expert on that compared to this, so I can't really say how true it is to the game, but I think it's safe to say it's not as good as the game. Most movies on this list are bad in interesting ways, but not this one. While most of them have parts that are better or worse than others, for the most part this is consistent in its badness. It announces its flaws up front and sticks with them. Said flaws are the acting and writing, but not in an entertaining way. The story is alright for the kind of movie this is, so nothing to make fun of there. We open on some soldiers on some island base, and like I might have implied before, this scene kind of shows you already how bad the acting and dialogue will be for the rest of the movie. Anyway, they get killed by something we can't see, and the rest of this scene feels like Predator. And credit where credit's due, the gore effects are pretty good. Like there's this one scene where this one guy's head is cut up by a chain link fence and it looks very gruesome. Next scene, we're introduced to the main character, who's a skipper for a boat carrying a couple with the two worst American accents I've ever heard. Seriously, these guys sound like a weird mix of German, Canadian, and cowboy. But they don't really matter. The actual story begins when a reporter with a slightly better American accent hires main guy to take her to the island army base. But the guy in charge of said base is evil and traps them both on the island. But the skipper is a former German Special Forces agent. You do the math. It turns out the bad guy was experimenting with creating a new invincible super soldier. He succeeded in making them invincible, but it also made them turn feral. And so when he pitches it to the army, they say something cheesy about how it's immoral and you've created monsters. But he's crazy, so he's still trying to make it work. And is trying to kill the heroes to cover up these experiments. The soldiers are also the ones that killed those guys at the beginning. You were expecting some kind of cool monster? They were just a bunch of crazy white people. The action scenes are pretty underwhelming. It's weird how the fight scenes in the Three Ninjas movies have fewer cuts than this alleged action movie for grown-ups. Come to think of it, those movies have better editing than a lot of modern blockbusters. For example, there's one scene in this movie where a car with the heroes in it is being lifted up by an enemy helicopter. But then the rope holding them breaks, freeing them, and the helicopter explodes? I don't know what happened. I guess it kinda looked like the rope somehow hit the rotors, but I can't tell. Also, unrelated to the editing, there's a scene where the reporter throws a grenade but it doesn't explode because she forgot to pull the pin out. What? And there are these really awkward moments of bad comic relief, but that only gets worse about halfway through when we are introduced to the actual comic relief character. A member of the base's kitchen staff who tags along with the hero but does nothing except be really annoying. I've said before that this movie rarely has scenes that are worse than the rest of it. Many of the worst exceptions to this rule come from this guy. So yeah, this is a far cry from a good movie. But don't give up hope for a good adaptation just yet, because Ubisoft announced that they're making a movie based on Far Cry 3 through their motion picture division, in addition to movies based on Watch Dogs and Raving Rabbids. Although that announcement was in 2013 and nothing's happened since, so you know what, just give up hope. In conclusion, it's really bad. It tries to be an 80s style B-movie where a former special ops guy goes up against an army of bad guys, and it's charming in its simplicity, and not charming in any other regard. A mess from start to finish, but not in a fun way. Subscribe to my Patreon, link in the description.